Hi, welcome to Community Homework's virtual class this evening. Tonight we are going to be covering the second half of our hand tools class. If you missed the first half, go back and look. 2 weeks ago we aired that one, and this will be the second part of that. And the first half we introduced a lot of the hand tools, and tonight we're going to be talking about some more of them and also how to actually use some of the hand tools. My name is Jason. I'm the education manager here at Community Homeworks. Normally, Jean is introducing these workshops, but Jean is away on vacation tonight, so I get to come and visit with you. Thank you very much for joining us. I wanted to remind you that Community Homeworks is a nonprofit organization. We rely on grants and donations and other types of funding like that to keep our doors open and our lights on. So if you get anything out of this workshop tonight, please visit our website, www.communityhomeworks.org, and click on the donate button. We'd really appreciate that. For our hand tools class tonight, joining me is the one and only Lee Taylor. And Lee works with Habitat for Humanity during the day, and evenings he comes and teaches classes here. And Lee has been doing this a long time, so he knows a lot of good stuff. If during this workshop tonight you have a question, please put it in the comment section down below, and we will try to bring it up and have Lee answer those questions. But otherwise, sit back and enjoy the class. Make sure you're paying attention because if you are from Habitat, there will be a quiz on this. Habitat folks do get credit for this class as one of the basic classes that you're required to take. So, Lee, thank you for being here. Good to see you.
Yeah, good seeing you too. Thanks a lot. Yeah, like Jason said, definitely if you have questions and you're watching this live, ask them. They said this part of the hand tools is kind of the more of what you can do with them and how you actually use them and stuff like that, and be able to show a little more details on them. We're probably not going to be going over all the ones that we went over, but I'm going to kind of concentrate on just some of the stuff that I found helpful over the years, and a few tricks and whatnot. So again, if you have questions, just ask. So we started out with hammers last time, and I was talking about the curved claw hammer, or that part, and then the rip claw hammer, which is this big guy right here, where this is straight out like this. And I was saying that this is a lot more useful. I want to show you some tricks, and I'm going to not necessarily do it with this one. I can do it with this guy. This is kind of an in-between sort of deal. So a lot of times what happens is if you're hammering something, and what will happen occasionally is that head will pop off and you'll have to be able to pull that nail. And a lot of people really fight with this. And a trick you can do is you can get the hammer and engage it into that nail. I'm just going to use this other one. If you have another one around, it helps. Tap it in a little bit like this. What you can do is actually turn it sideways, back it out, you're going to engage that again, and you're going to turn it sideways like this. And you just keep doing that to be able to pull that nail right out, even if it doesn't have a head on it. So it tears the nail up. But like I said, that's a nice little trick to be able to do, because occasionally that does happen where you're going to be needing to get that nail pulled. I am going to do something here, and I might as well talk about this. I'm going to nail into this. I'm going to nail right into this. I'll talk about nailing. Let's see if we can get this thing pried off. Let's see. I'm going to move this way. So when you're hammering, a lot of times this is a pretty common occurrence as far as people if they're not used to hammering all the time. What happens is that when they're hammering, they have a tendency to bend that nail. And I was talking about this a little bit last time. And one of the issues is that when you're hammering, and this boils down to the weight and stuff of the hammer. So the heavier the hammer, the less time the less amount you're going to have to actually strike the head of that nail. So a little heavier hammer is going to be able to drive that nail down a little bit more and a little bit quicker. The other thing is, and this is similar to, we talked about this in power tools, as far as having your screw in line, your drill driver in line with your screw, as far as not letting it slip and strip the screw out. On a nail, what happens is that you want the head of that hammer to be in line with your nail. And what I mean by that is, if you hit it, let's say like this, that nail is going to shoot this way. Like that, it's going to shoot that way. If you're hitting it this way, it's going to come towards me. If you're hitting it this way, it's going to bend that way. So a lot of times when you're hammering, you want to make sure that your hammer head is in line, in a sense, with your nail. You're going to be holding that hammer back a little bit further, down here. If you're holding it up here, you just don't have that much swing on momentum to be able to drive that nail. And it is practice. It's one of those things that, and I'll probably miss a couple times too. But when you're driving that nail, you want to be right on, and you're doing slight little adjustments. You're tipping it one way or the other, because again, that nail sometimes is going to bend. And you're driving that nail right in just like that. Like I said, this is a 16-ounce hammer, and I was saying you can frame with that. I'll show you what I'm doing this for a reason too. So the other is, I'll show you with this is a 19-ounce framing hammer. And you always want to watch your thumb. I don't know how many times I smashed that. But again, this has a lot more reach and a lot more swing. And you can see what I was talking about. See that dimple I was talking about last time? That waffle head? It makes it so that it bites that head of that nail, but it does leave quite an imprint. Not good if you're trying to do finish work or something along that line. The other reason that nails bend, and people will do this too, is that they will say, all right, they may understand about having that, keeping that head square with the nail. What they do is they'll tap. They're tapping really light. And the problem is that the more you hit it, the weaker the metal becomes and the more apt it is to be able to bend. So, just like that, you see how it's starting to bend. It's going to bend down here. It might bend up here. There are different quality of nails. It seems like the older nails do hold up a little bit better. It just boils down to the steel and stuff. So what happens if you have a nail that has just gotten so beat up that you just can't drive it straight anymore? Well, there's a couple things you can try. Sometimes all you need to do is back to this claw part, and this is why I like it, and I have the leverage. I can grab it like this and just straighten it up a little bit. I can also grab it like this and bend that nail back to where I want and bend it back into straight, and then go after it again. But bend this thing to 10. So
you can't talk while you're hammering.
Yeah.
So here you go.
I can't talk while I'm hammering. So yeah, sometimes that nail just gets to a point where you just cannot be able to pull that out. So what happens is you have to be able to, you won't be able to drive it. So this is where will want to be able to pry that nail out. Now there's a couple of things you got to think about. what is this part of your hammer actually resting on? And then how long is your handle? The whole thing of leverage and all that sort of stuff to be able to pull that nail out. And this is the other reason I was talking about the metal fatigue and whatnot, as far as inexpensive hammers having that break. Because like I said, if you're prying this out, I can't really pry this out because, right? Normally you're dealing with something that is a little more attached. But, sometimes you're just prying it out easy enough to be able to pry it back that way, like I just did. Sometimes you may need something up here. So you can grab another scrap piece of wood or something like that to be able to tip this up. Imagine my hand is a piece of wood. I didn't grab an extra one. Don't use your hand, please. You can use a hammer too. I've seen people do that, where they just need a little bit more leverage. And you can use something. You can use really anything to be able to leverage that out a little bit more. And you're going to find that you're going to need that more often if you don't have a longer handled hammer. It's not necessarily about strength. It's more about leverage and stuff like that. So having, a fulcrum there to be able to pull that nail out really does help. You can also use the old trick like I showed you before, as far as digging that nail in and, a little bit this way and then reinserting it and then going the other way, back and forth, to be able to pull that nail out. Occasionally, I got to do something here real quick. I got to drive these two because I'm going to show you something that this is going to move. And I'll show you this actually. So, little framing trick, I guess. So if you're nailing, this is called sistering, two boards together. I can show you an example over here. Maybe I can show you an example over here. Oh, maybe. Well, come back here, honey. So you can see where they have, in this wall cavity, you have a stud here, and then you have another one, a stud here, right? And you're nailing these two together. So I'm going to say use that as your visual. What a lot of people have a tendency to do is they will nail right up the center. And you don't really want to do that. Can you see my wood here? You don't really want to nail right up the center. What you want to do is you want to nail about an inch in. If you're closer than an inch from the edge of the wood, it's not really, that nail's not going to really do much. You're going to split the wood and whatnot. So I call it an inch rule. I come in at about an inch, and then I'll put just a little bit of an angle on it. A lot of times if you're going straight in, that nail's going to pop out the other side depending on the size of your nail. So I'll angle it just a little bit.
Let's get the angle.
I'll angle that nail, and then drive that nail in. My second one's going to be here. Third one's going to be here. So I'm going to back that back and forth. And the reason for that, the reason for that is that if you run nails right at the center of a board that you're sistering on, there's a good chance, especially with today's lumber, that board is going to cup. It's going to do this, so it's going to be laying flat, and then it's going to slowly cup up like this, and potentially sometimes even crack right down the middle, and then that board that you've nailed on is kind of worthless at that point. But this staggering makes it so it keeps that board where it needs to be. And how you nail it with your good old hammer makes a difference. All right, so we're going back to pulling these nails. Sometimes you're gonna get into a situation where you have a board that's all nailed up. I don't care if it's a vertical, horizontal, doesn't matter. where you're going to run into a situation where there was a goof and you have to remove that board. And you have all these nails that are driven in or sunk. And it's part of the reason they call them sinkers. We'll get into that in a minute. So you have to remove that board. We talked about this in power tools class. Sometimes there's a little bit of a gap between the two boards, and you might be able to get something like a Sawzall blade in there, thin bimetal blade, to be able to cut that out. Sometimes there's not. There are a couple of ways that you can go after this. I'm going to show you a couple of those tricks that with some of the common tools that you can use. Obviously, with a hammer, you're not going to be able to grab that head of that nail. It's sunk in. You're not going to be able to grab that. It's just not going to happen. You do have what's called cat's paw. And the reason they call it a cat's paw is it looks like a cat paw. It kind of curves like this and has these two sharp points. It's real little V-notch here. The reason for that is, and you might want to come on this side, you'll probably be able to see it just a little better. So what I'm doing is I'm putting those points right in front of that nail head right there. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to hold it at an angle like this, not straight up, but I'm going to be tipping it down. And I'm actually going to be digging into that wood. It does kind of mess up that board, but you can see now that's kind of dug in there, and that is just underneath. And I can grab that cat's paw and pull it out enough. You're not going to pull out the whole nail. Sometimes you get lucky and you can pull it out, but now that head of that nail is exposed, and I can get my hammer and lock into it and be able to pull that nail out. Now, yes, it does tear up your board a little bit. It does leave gouges and whatnot. So this is where you have to kind of think about what kind of tool you're using, and whether you want to reuse that board. With lumber prices, sometimes you may want to make it so that you're not necessarily tearing that board up. It might be something that you're going to see on a deck or something like that. And man, you really just don't want to mar that board up. There's another option. So we were talking about good old flat bar, and I was saying these flat bars are really nice. You can be able to get in between these boards. Now, there are different styles of flat bars. There are flat bars out there that are much smaller and thinner. And I was going to grab one from home, and I didn't. This is a smaller one, but it's not necessarily thinner. It's a little bit thinner. There are some that are real thin. But, like I said, all variations on this. So, what you can do sometimes, and normally, most of the time you're working on this, it's usually vertical. But what you can do is usually there's just a bit of a gap between those two pieces of sistered wood. Enough sometimes where I can get that tip in, and then I can pry it, and then be able to get, a hammer in it and work my way up. And this is back to why I like these, is that I can put my hammer in here like this and rock it out and work my way up and rock that piece out without necessarily tearing up the surface of that board. And it really leaves minimal. You can see that little spot. I don't know if you can pick it up on the camera. That little spot right there is just the spot that I went in with the head of that flat bar. And now I have, I can do whatever I need to do. And that's part of what I want to do now. I can drive these nails back out. What some people will do is they'll drive them down a little bit like that. And depending on what it is that you're doing, sometimes, you know, they might be sticking out like that. That's fine. Do whatever it is you need to do. If you want to pull them, you pull them, just like we talked about. Sometimes people just want to be able to reposition it for whatever reason. And then nothing saying you can't reuse those nails to be able to drive that down nice and flush there. Then sometimes the only reason you're pulling a board is it might not be flush. It might be kicked off like this. So sometimes you only have to necessarily go after one nail. But like I said, there's a couple of different ways, and you're seeing what I'm leaving. And this is why they call this a framing hammer. It's not a finish hammer, because all this I'm leaving on the wood. And we're talking about saving that piece of wood, right? So yeah, a couple of tricks with that. Generally, when you're using any kind of pry tool, you want to be able to pull toward you. The reason for that, and this is, don't ask me if this is a for sure thing. For me, what I've learned over the years, and usually the hard way, is that if I'm trying to push something, it has more of a tendency to break loose, and I'm pitching forward, if that makes sense. And because a lot of times you may find yourself on a ladder or something along that line trying to do this. So as a general rule, I found that by prying towards you a little bit, it gives you usually you have a little more strength pulling toward you, and you usually have a little more control pulling toward you. And you're less likely to get a surprise if something releases or something along that line. So generally with that sort of thing, prying is a little bit easier. And it's usually a little bit easier on you too. Show you another trick with these. I was talking about the magnets last week. So this one here, there's a little magnet right there. And just that. Oh, of course it doesn't do it. Show you the other trick. Well, so I drop my nail, right? I should be able to reach down, pick up so I'm not having to bend down, right?
As far.
Another good reason to have a long handle. But what this does is that holds that. So I was talking about that. I'm going to back up a little bit. So sometimes you're on that ladder and you may need to reach. You may need to be able to reach. You may need to be able to reach out this way. There you go. So you may need to be able to reach out this way. You don't necessarily want to lean, or it may be a little higher. So that holds that, and you can be able to reach out. Oh yeah, right. You're able to reach out and be able to stick that in. And of course, it's not wanting to work with me today. It's being stubborn. Most of the time, you can do that, and it's being stubborn with me today. And that could be an issue with, I want to show you this. Come here, a little closer. What I was doing, that nail head was actually up like this and not up against that part of that flat end of that hammer. Up against like that. Let's see if that works a little better now. Nada. But that's the idea, is that will hold that and usually make it so that you can drive that in and not fling it across the room. Back to why I should be wearing safety glasses. So, yeah, there are a couple of things with this. One of the things I get asked a lot of times is what nails you should be using in pressure treated wood you're going to be using outside. This is pressure treated wood, has that green tinge to it. These kind of nails like this, these are standard nails. There's no coating on them or anything along that line. When these are put into pressure treated wood and they're exposed to moisture and whatnot like that, what outside stuff is going to get, these nails will actually corrode within a couple of years if you're using non-galvanized nails. So what you want is a galvanized nail. A lot of times they're called hot dip galvanized. They'll have like a real dark gray coating on them. They may even look kind of lumpy, but those are designed to be able to deal with the treated lumber and not necessarily corrode. So that's a big one. Same thing with screws. We talked about that a little bit in the other class. You always, if you're using pressure treated lumber in some outdoor project, which an outdoor project you should be, unless it's something like cedar or naturally rot resistant. However, you're putting that together with the treated lumber should be done with, they said, galvanized or hot dip galvanized nails and or screws, and they'll say they're rated for treated lumber. So that is one of those things that you want to make sure that you know what it is that you're fastening all this with. A lot of times I've seen where people make something really nice. They do all their cuts, they do all that stuff, and everything's, put together real nice and all that. And I looked a little closer and they've used non-galvanized materials or non-galvanized fasteners or non-rated fasteners. And it's just like, oh, is it going to fall apart right away? No. In a couple of years, yeah. So keep that in mind when you're doing it. If you're not sure, ask. Are these rated for treated wood? That sort of thing. Unless you're building that out of cedar, but don't think many people are using cedar these days. It's a bit expensive. So couple of little tricks as far as the hammering and that as far as lumber goes and prying that stuff out. Let's see, what is the next thing that we talked about? Claw hammer, there. And we'll see. So we were talking about the 6-in-1s, and this is where, we were talking about this, where this is a screwdriver set, and it comes with 2 sizes. So you have your number 1, and we were talking about this, last time, as far as screw size, and this can be a little difficult. I usually pass this around. Very small tip like this is a number 1. A medium tip like this is a number 2, and a number 3 is just a little bit bigger than that. So 1 is kind of your number 1 size. So if somebody says, hey, I need a number 1 Phillips, and you're looking at these 2 different sizes, you're looking straight down on the head, you'd say that's your number 1. It's just a little sharper point. So it has the spot to be able to hold your number 1s. That's going to have a nut driver right there. And then on this side, so it has your 2, your flathead, your Phillips, and then that size nut driver. The thing with these is that, a lot of people will try to, we talk about this in Power Tools class, where there's a bit set, and you can put a little magnetic holder in and be able to switch out different bits and stuff for your drill drivers. And a lot of times they'll find out that, hey, it's the same size, and I should be able to put my drill driver magnetic holder or something like that in my 6-in-1. And yes, you can. But the issue is that, see this little ball right here? That little ball is meant to lock it in so you don't lose it. As goofy as that sounds. And I mean, will it work in a pinch? Yes. But that's what that little ball is. So, if you're going to the store and let's say you've stripped out your Phillips, number 2 is usually what the issue is. Don't be buying one of those bit sets that is for a drill driver and thinking that it's going to work in this. You have to get one that actually has that little ball, and they usually have a flat blade and a Phillips on the other side. So with your number 2, it's the same deal. Just 2 larger sizes and then a larger nut driver. So that's your 6-in-1, 2, 4, 5, 6. And I was saying last time that I couldn't remember why they called 10-in-1s. And then Jason brought one down and threw it at my head, and I went, oh, that's right. So 10-in-1. So just like 6-in-1, but you have smaller ones, right? So you have your number 2 Phillips, and number 2 flat. You have that size nut driver. So this is very much just like the 6-in-1 so far. The bits, much smaller, comparable. I'll hold these, set these down and let you look at them. So these bits are a lot different size. But the cool part is that I can put this in. So there's your 1, 2, 3. I can pull this whole thing out. I have an insert here. And this is my number 1s. 4, 5, 6. Then I have that nut driver size compared to this nut driver size. So 2 different size nut drivers, depending on how I pull it out. So this is really neat. You'll be able to slip all this in. And then you have the same thing on the other side. Now, I'm going to point this out. And this might be hard to see on the camera. Maybe I'll put a piece of white here that might make it a little bit easier to see. So these are what are called square drive. And the square drives are just the same way. You know, you got number 1s, number 2 is larger, number 3 is even larger. So you have the square drives. Those are nice. They are a little less likely to strip out than, say, your standard Phillips or something along that line. So occasionally you're going to run across it where you're going to run across a screw or you're going to have a square drive. And then whether it's a number 1 or number 2, that's where this is nice. And you have that, you know, that drive there. And then the same deal. I can flip this over and I have same drive on this side, but this side I have what's called a Torx. This has all it looks like a star. Some people call them star drive. They're really called Torx drive. Some people just call them T. And what they mean, T is for torque. These ones here are really nice because you just have more surface area grabbing onto that screw and less likelihood of stripping. These, on the other hand, as far as the Torx go, these are set up in a number system. So the smaller the number, the smaller it is. And a lot of times it's printed on the side. And once you get to a certain age and you forget your readers, you can never read it. But half the time, yeah, it's not even on there. This one doesn't have it on there. But a lot of times they're stamped right on the side. But I'm going to say that from experience, I can look at this one and say that's probably a T15 because it's a little smaller versus that size, which is a T20. And there's T25, there's T30, there's T35, 40. You know, there are some Torx heads out there that are big like that. Of course, they're for screws that are this long. But, you know, when they say T whatever, the higher the number, the bigger this part is. So that's, you know, that's a bit of a difference with the Phillips and stuff. So that is your 10-in-1. You can see all that all locks in. Right. So that's where a little variation on the standard 6-in-1 versus something like a 10-in-1. So like I said, there's a couple of variations on these. What you don't want to do, and I won't do it with Jason's, and I won't really do it with this one. I have seen people where they're, for whatever reason, getting a hammer and they're pounding on this thing like this. Don't do that, because what happens is that it's going to jam this way inside here, and it's going to make it a nightmare to actually pull out. I've seen sometimes where actually somebody hurt themselves because they were doing that and they were hitting it, and then they went like this and it popped out and actually hit them in the face. This part ended up punching through and gouged them, hit their face or clawed their hand up or whatever. So these aren't meant to be driven. These are not a striking tool. And what I mean by that is, any tool that is meant to be hit is a striking style tool.
Can you purchase replacement Phillips flathead sizes, or do you have to purchase an entire unit with all sizes?
That is a really good question. So, yes, it depends on where you go. Some of the smaller hardware stores, you can walk in and you'll see a bin of a bunch of these, and you buy them. Pretty simple. So here's the story. I'm not going to pick on the store, but one of the major stores, I have one of these and I've had it for years, and it finally just kind of, bit the dust. It stripped out, and I was just like, man. So I went to this store, and they had a warranty on their hand tools, and I was like, hey, you got this hand tool warranty. Does it cover stripping the heads out? And they went, yeah, it does. Actually, I was surprised. And I said, well, so I just need the tip then. I don't need to replace the whole thing. There's nothing wrong with that. And they said, well, we don't sell these. I went, well, that's kind of goofy. And they went, yeah, I agree. He said, but it does still have a warranty. So they had me go get a whole new 6-in-1 for a stripped out bit. Kind of felt bad, but I took their offer. So that's back to that warranty thing. But yes, you can buy those. A lot of times it seems like the smaller hardware stores and stuff like that have them. I ratted through that whole store, that big box store, and I was just amazed I couldn't find it. And finally found out that they just didn't even sell it. So to answer your question, sometimes. So that's just one of those things. And sometimes that's something that is worth asking when you're buying something. So we talked about that, having the warranty and stuff along that line. So I am going to start talking about tape measures now. All right. So we were talking about this last time as far as your tape measure. And we were talking about a couple things. I was talking about a 25-foot. It's the max length on it is a good general home use. I was saying don't buy those little ones like this guy. And the main reason is, and this one's a little bit better. It's a little Stanley. So usually their metal's a little bit better. But man, I can't even get this thing out to 4 foot. No, that's not doing it. Maybe 3. No, not 3.5 foot. Okay, maybe 3 foot. Ooh, yeah, 3 foot. As far as standout goes, as far as how far can you reach to be able to hook that on. And that's part of the reason I don't like these, is just that you actually find yourself having to stretch or, trying to hold it out here and hook onto it and stuff. And plus, the hook on it is really small. Now, are these things, they have their place? Yes. I mean, if you're doing a small little project, there's nothing wrong with these. If you're trying to do something where you're reaching out, let's say I want to take a measurement from that table to where I am, I can hold this like this, stop this thing from bouncing. And, I could say, that table's exactly 6 foot away. I wouldn't be able to do that with that small one. So that's one of the things I was talking about as far as the length goes. The other is, if you're using a 25 or 30 or whatever it is, don't think that you're going to actually get a full 25 out of it. You can, but you got to be careful, and I'll show you why. So let's stretch this guy out. So I'm going to be shooting it along like this. I'm at 12 foot, 14 foot. 18 feet, 19 feet,
You're gonna hit the wall.
23. Now, I want to show you this. So you can see on this, I'm at 24 feet. This is a 25-foot tape.
Oops.
See where it starts saying caution, attention, hey, don't pull me out. If you pull this all the way out, and I don't want to break there, there's the end of that tape right there, 25 foot. What's going to happen if you pull this a little bit more? It's just going to totally come undone. So, and that's usually why I'll say, get a little longer length than you think you're going to need. That way you don't run that risk of pulling it out. Because once it's pulled out beyond, you're not necessarily getting it back together. I guess you really could unscrew it and try to wind it back up, but it's no fun. So, like I said, try to get that so that you're not necessarily ever going to get to the max length on that tape measure. All right. So let's go back to this. So we're going to talk about how this tape measure is broken up. So I'm going to use a nail. So here are your inch marks. And this full line like here is an inch mark. There's your inch mark. There's your inch mark. You have your half inch, quarter inch, right? Eighth. That's that line right there. I don't know if you can see that.
It's hard to see which
it is,
exact line you're pointing to. Oh, there's something.
Yeah. So that's your 8th, 16th. All right. So 16th, 64th, all that sort of stuff. Now, when the tape measure is laid out like this, if you've been using it for a while, I can look at it and go, yeah, it's 5.5. I'll be able to read that pretty quick. Sometimes, if you're not necessarily used to it, it can get a little maddening. But that's why I like these. I call these cheaters. And it's nice because it has 8. It has 8 there, quarter there, 3/8, half, 5/8, 3/4, 7/8. Most of the time, most people aren't going to be getting to anything finer than, say, 1/8 of an inch. If you're going finer than that, generally you're at that point where you know how to read a tape at that point. Especially for something like rough framing or something along that line. So, like I said, sometimes, especially,
the lights went out.
I'll go turn the lights on. I think I can. I should see if I can reach out to the tape measure and focus.
Oh, there they went back.
Lack of motion. Anyway, so yeah, it's nice where it has it written right out to be able to see that and be able to read those tape measures a lot easier and a lot quicker and usually a lot more accurately. The other thing is that if you're using a tape measure, let's say you lock it in the lock position. We talked about that as far as being able to move it, and it's not necessarily crimping that whole tape measure, the metal part of it down. When you're done with it, put it back in. And I think I said this before. It's when people are doing this. It's metal, but metal will fatigue after a while and it will start breaking. So that is just as far as general care, keeping it clean. When you're not using it, let it stay inside. A lot of people will lock it down like this, and then it falls off. And I get my tape, and they grab it like this. No, don't do that. If you want your tape to last, don't do what I just did. So, like I said, keeping that tape measure in good shape. And, some of them do have that warranty issue. So a couple other little things to kind of look at. And it seems kind of silly, but I've run into it too many times to be able to explain. I'm not seeing this. So the clip on the back, right? And you can see with all these clips, 3 different style tapes here, all these clips are pretty close. You can see how this one's a little bit wider than, say, this guy or this guy here. Why is that important? Well, it depends on how you use that tape. And I don't have my work pants on. But anyways, what that's for is to be able to clip to a belt or something along that line. And you saw how relatively easy that was to be able to clip it on. So I have my tape where I need it. Sometimes they're not necessarily beveled up like that. They're real flat, and they can be a real bear sometimes. Yeah, you can't really see it, but they can be a real bear sometimes to be able to hook on. And it sounds silly, but you know, if you're sitting on top of a ladder, the last thing you really want to be doing is trying to hook your tape on, and meanwhile you lose your balance and off the side. So that's a little detail like that. And most of the time they're going to have one that you can try to be able to hook that. Some people don't use that. Some people hate it, pull it off. Fine. You can do that too. Some people put it in a pouch or something along that line. So, but it's just, like I said, it's these little small little details that make life a little more frustrating or a little easier. So, and I am running out of time again. And I'll talk about a stud finder. So stud finders out there. I'll walk over to this wall and show you what I'm talking about with this. So will I be able to open the door? I will. All right, so let's say you have a wall and you need to be able to find that stud so you can hang a picture or something along that line. So a lot of different stud finders out there. How do I say this nicely? Sometimes those stud finders lie. So what I do is, A, you want to make sure your battery's in good shape. You usually have a little 9-volt or, you know, something along that line. So 9-volt battery there. I want to make sure that's in good shape. Sometimes they have depth adjustment. So they'll talk about what it is, how deep it's having to penetrate through. This is 1/2-inch drywall. And most stud finders are going to do perfectly fine with that. I'm going to place that onto the wall and press that button. And I'm going to move it along. There's stud. And there's a real wide stud. And like I said, sometimes, there it is. Sometimes it lies. So what I always do is, if I have a stud finder and I'm trying to find out where that stud is, I'm going to cheat because I know there's a stud right here. So I'm going to come along like this. And I can see that. That's usually showing where the center of that stud is. In this style, yeah, you can't see it on that. But this one has it where it kind of shows the edge, and it shows a little diagram in here as far as how wide that stud is. Generally, studs are about 1.5 inches wide. So if you're using a stud finder or something along that line, that's great. Put a little mark. I always say test it. So get a little nail or something like that, and let's say you're gonna be hanging something over it. I use a real small nail or something like that just to poke it in to see if that stud is actually there before I go driving something into it. And a lot of times these small stud finders can kind of get confused sometimes. Sometimes they'll find wires in the wall, and they'll read it as a stud. Some of them are able to say, hey, that's an electrical wire, or hey, that's a wood stud, or whatever, or hey, that's a metal pipe. So all different types out there. If you're using it, as goofy as it sounds, don't fully trust it. Always kind of verify that that's where it is. Another way you can verify.
Do stud finders have a harder time on lath or plaster than drywall?
Yeah, so, and this is where the quality of that stud finder comes in play as far as how thick of whatever it is trying to work through. So with drywall, you can see on this side, and we'll probably talk about this in drywall class, this is just paper with gypsum in between. It's relatively soft, and paper on this side. So it's relatively thin versus lath that has the wood slats and then however many layers, possibly up to an inch, inch and a half of plaster that it has to work through to be able to find whatever's behind it. So yes, that can throw it off a little bit. With a wall like this, you can always do a little tack test. So you can go along. Sometimes, let's see. Yeah, this wall's not doing it. Oh yeah, it is. Hear that? I don't know if you can hear that sound difference on that. But again, I can hear that and I go, yeah, I bet you money there's a stud there just by the sound of that wall. So some people will do a little tap test. It's another little trick you can do to be able to do that and then check it. So stud finders, they're great. There are stud finders out there that are really nice, or a wide one, and they have LED lights on them, and you can hold it horizontally and run along like this. And that light will light up as wide as whatever the stud is. A single stud, inch and a half, or a double stud, or something like that. It will actually show you on that light up bar where that stud is. And yeah, they're great, but they cost about $30. So is that one of those things that you want? Maybe, maybe not. So, all right. We have about 6 minutes left. Oh boy, jeez. Time just gets away from me. All right. So here's another real common tool that we were talking about last time. So this is your slip joint pliers. I was talking about how many times you could be using this and all this sort of stuff. Now you can notice that a lot of times these have really aggressive teeth.
You can't see them.
If you can't see them, you might be able to see them there. But they have really aggressive teeth, and they're there for a reason. If you're clamping onto something, you know, and I want it to actually hold, that's what you want those teeth for. So, you know, those teeth will bite into whatever it is you're clamping onto and make it so it's less likely to slip on you. Sometimes you don't want that. So let's say you're trying to put in something that's round, that has a finish on it like chrome or something along that line. A couple things you can do to cheat to be able to not mar that finish up. Some people will get duct tape. Some people will get painter's tape. And this one's kind of wore out after some time, but they'll wrap these teeth with that tape, and this is falling apart right now. It's been wrapped for a while. But it makes it so it's going to bite, but it's not going to necessarily mar up that finish. A lot of times, usually what I see is shower heads or something along that line that's about coming out, and they put a new one on, and they use something like this, and it just gouges it up really bad. So you could always wrap your tool, the part that's biting on, for something that you don't necessarily want to mar up. It's a nice little simple trick you can do. Part of the reason we talk about have a little roll of duct tape or something along that line. We were talking about, talk about these guys. So vice grips, and I think vice grip is a brand name. It's one of those deals. This is a locking pliers. So what this does, I'll show you this. I'll show you easier with. I'm going to make more noise. So let's say, and I'm just using this as an example. It's not necessarily meant to pull out nails. But I'm going to just use this as an example. So what I can do is I can say I need to grab onto something, right? And I have an adjustment right here, and I can tighten it so that it's actually going to grab real hard, or I can loosen it just a little bit. And what I'm doing is I'm making it so that I can squeeze this together and it's going to lock like that. You'll notice that this little part right here, this is the release. When I press that, it's going to open, and then I can lock it down again. This is really nice. So I'm gonna pick on a screw, and this is just one of the many things that this can do. So let's say this was a screw. The head is totally stripped out. You can't get it out for nothing, but you need to get it out. So what you can do is you can lock on like this, and you can actually, if this were a screw, I'd be able to spin it out. But I'm grabbing onto that head, and I'd be able to spin that screw out. Sometimes people will put it on this way. You know, I could bite. You can see how this curves a little bit, so it changes how you have to be able to adjust this. So I'm going to go like this, and you can see these bottom teeth going, if I can grab it. And you see sometimes what happens is if I get it where I want, but I'm not able to really squeeze it down, I can back this off counterclockwise just a little bit until it gets to that point where it'll lock. Now I'll be able to pry this out. You know, we use these, sometimes we drive big long stakes into the ground and they're really hard to get out. Well, we'll just get out our pair of locking pliers, so you can get longer ones and bigger ones and be able to grab onto that pipe. And I'll just use this. Now I have a hand lever and I can go and wiggle that thing right out of the ground. So locking pliers are really nice. They do have a bit of a few moving parts to them. So they have a tendency sometimes to spring out. You know, obviously you have this part here. And if this gets backed out too much, this is going to come flying out. You have a spring in here.
Your fingers in the way.
You know, you have a little spring, and that's what actually puts the tension on when that closes down. It helps that. So, like I said, these are one of those tools that if you're not using them and you're in your toolbox, I like to personally close them down. I've seen it where some people, if they, you know, it's one of these tools where if you don't use it a lot, you throw it in your toolbox and it springs open and it takes up a lot of space. So I've seen it where sometimes people get a little bit of tape or something like that and just do a quick wrap around just to make it so that while it's in its toolbox, it's not wanting to spring open. The other is that with most metal tools, I think I mentioned this before, but I want to leave you with this, and I didn't get to the socket set either. Dang it. Anyways, is what I'll do occasionally for moving parts is I'll get my WD-40 and just squirt a little bit in those parts that move, help lubricate them up a little bit. I got a little spot right there, a little spot right there, you know, on the threads and stuff. This is just one of these things that makes it so that your tools are less likely to seize up and rust. What some people will do is they'll spray a paper towel or something along that line, and they'll wipe their tools down to put a thin coat of oil on them, which is fine. The only thing you have to keep in mind with this is that if you do that and it's oily, it can become a slip hazard. So, like I said, some people do that, and there's really nothing wrong with that as long as you wipe it off. You know, because like I said, sometimes these tools will sit. You may not need them for years. So to me, I would rather spray them a little bit and let them sit in my toolbox and not rust up. And then when I need them, I may need to, you know, get something to be able to cut that grease a little bit to, you know, if it's definitely slippery to hold on to, be able to cut that grease, clean that thing off, make it so it's not becoming a slip hazard. So this is the thing of, you don't want your tools hurting you. And sometimes the things that you may do to them can actually cause that. I said I was going to do this. I got to do it. Got to make a mess. All right, our parting thing. Yep, I said I got to use this. All right, so sometimes you have, we were talking about slipping
Turn
and
it
whatnot,
this way so I can see that.
good old plastic dip. So sometimes you get handles that have, bare metal, and sometimes you may want, something that has a little better grip on it. So it's the same size, all this stuff, but this has a little handle grip that makes it easier to be able to control. I haven't used this stuff. I've seen it and all this sort of stuff. And I imagine you'd probably want to clean this with something like rubbing alcohol or something along that line. And what you're going to do is not make a mess. Dip this stuff into wherever you want. And pull it out. Obviously, read the instructions and all that good stuff. But you can see it does a nice little coat on it. And according to Jason, he said that it seemed to work out really nice initially, but if that can sat a little long open like this, it kind of got goopy. Didn't really want to cling anymore. So, and then I would set this off to the side and be able to hopefully use another hand tool to hold it and let it dry overnight or whatever it calls for. But that's nice. I mean, you can use something like this to be able to dip quite a few tools, bunch of different colors, stuff like that. And people do similar things to handles of hammers and all that sort of stuff too. So, if you have a friend and you guys go to a garage sale and you find a bunch of, inexpensive metal tools and you want to grip it, go in together on a, $10 can of whatever dip or whatever, and you can dip all your tools and call it good. And I didn't get to everything I wanted to. But that's kind of the cool thing about hand tools is that there's millions and millions of them. What did Carl Sagan used to say? Billions and billions of stars. Oh, I'm babbling. Anyways, thanks for watching.
Thank you very much, Lee. Great program tonight. We had some great, we had some comedy.
The lights go off, nails go flying across the room. Oh yeah. It was good.
So on the plastic dip, how long does that take to dry?
You're asking me to read the instructions?
No, I thought you would have read them before you did before you showed it to us.
No, I did not.
Okay, it's all right.
But I am curious. 4 hours minimum to dry.
Okay.
And
sounds great.
You wouldn't want to use that in an enclosed space. Oh, man.
Thank you very much, Lee. Great workshop again tonight. And thank you, Lori, for filming. Did a great job. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us. All of you out there in virtual land. If you come up with questions that you have later on that you would like to ask that you weren't able to ask today, please send us an email at the address at the bottom of the screen, or you can give us a call or something so that we can be in touch and we'll try to get an answer for you.
And I want to add something to that. I think you guys are going to be going to, hopefully going back to in-person classes.
Correct. We're planning to go back to in-person classes starting in September.
That'd be cool. So yeah, the in-person ones are real nice because you can actually grab it and feel it and all that sort of stuff. So, and I with the in-person ones, but hey.
All right. Thanks again, Lee. And thank you everyone for joining us. Tune in another time for another workshop. Thank you.
Bye.